Andreas Krieg is assistant professor in the Defense Studies Department at King's College London. He joins us from London. We appreciate your time. So both sides have said, no, we're not budging. But have they said no in the same way with the same messaging? How would you characterize it?
That's very interesting. I think that currently the blockading countries have said no very determinedly, but what came out yesterday out of the Cairo meetings seems to suggest that they don't really have a strategy, and they seem to be taking a less harsh step than we expected. For the most part, they came up with the same unsubstantiated request that they had made already 4 weeks ago. They didn't really come up with any additional demands. For the most part, they actually haven't taken on some of the demands that they issued 4 weeks ago. So when it comes to Jazeera and when it comes to some of the other demands, such as the Turkish base, they didn't really reiterate these demands, but really focused on terrorism. And they've done that really with, in a very unsubstantiated way, without providing any evidence and making very vague statements. So we don't really know what to take from this, because what does it actually mean? We want Qatar to stop funding terrorism. I think the issue here is with the concept of terrorism in itself. It's a very ill-defined concept. So we don't really know how firmly they are in terms of achieving their outcome. And I also think that the ends are not very well defined at the moment by these 4 blockading countries. For the most part, I think they also don't have a strategy of how to achieve these outcomes. And I think that is a key issue we're moving forward. Qatar has said we're willing to negotiate, we're willing to address many of these issues as long as they don't really interfere with international law and don't interfere with our sovereignty. And the 4 countries seem to have taken some of it on board. We don't really know how this is going to look like moving forward, though.
So let me ask you this: who is the audience that these 4 countries are speaking to? Literally, who is it that they're trying to reach when they have these events and say things like this?
Right. I think the key audience has been, for the UAE over the last couple of years, has been the West. The key audience has been the United States under the Trump administration. They've invested millions of dollars in their PR efforts in order to sell the idea of that Qatar is basically supporting terrorism. They haven't provided any evidence, but for them, they thought that they would get the international community, particularly the West, behind this effort by actually tarnishing the reputation of Qatar. But the issue has been generally that there's been a strategic miscalculation. They thought with all that pressure coming in, and particularly with having the Trump administration on board, that this pressure would actually bring Qatar to bend very quickly. But that didn't happen, because the Trump administration, especially the State Department and the Defense Department, have been quite ambiguous, sitting on the fence, almost leaning towards Qatar, while Trump has also backtracked a little bit when it comes to supporting this blockade against Qatar. So I think they've been trying to address this. They've been trying to shape the hearts and minds of the Europeans, and particularly also of the Americans, and they've seen that they haven't really achieved anything over the last 4 weeks. Quite on the contrary, I think the longer this blockade is going on, the more the international community will be against this blockade, because it's against free trade, it's against international law, it's against freedom of speech, and in many ways it's not really in line with the values of the West.
All right, Andreas Krieg joining us from London. Andreas, thank you.